I was born and raised in Bogota, Colombia, in the middle of a middle-class home that we were living in, right in the middle of downtown. And when I say in the middle, I really mean one of the most urban places that you can imagine. And growing up, I used to spend a lot of time in the house with my parents, and especially with my dad, watching nature documentaries, because when I was a year old, he had an accident, and most of the time he ended up having to use a wheelchair, which meant that he couldn't really be out and about and like take us out to different places. So a lot of my bonding time with my parents and with my dad in particular was to actually like watch nature documentaries about, typically at that time it was things about Africa and about Alaska. Now, when I grew up and when I actually started doing my own things, I started realizing that one of the things that I wanted to do the most was to travel and go places. And the first time I got to do that was when I was recruited to go to the army, and I went to the army for about 2 years. I spent some time in Egypt, some time in Colombia, and those travels kind of like made me realize that I wanted to have that part of my personal life, the traveling and the going places. So I came back and I enrolled in biology, and I started studying biology without really knowing what that really was. My first semester was horrible, though. I hated those classes. They were dull. I didn't feel that I fit. It just did not feel the right thing for me. So I was about to change my major, go into something different, when a friend of mine suggested that I should first go and take this field course in the middle of the Colombian Amazon, which I did, fortunately, because it was one of the most exciting things that I've done in my life. And in that course, I got to go to a really isolated, amazing piece of jungle where I saw animals mating, things eating each other, plants growing overnight, like this really fantastic place full of life and full of energy. So going back to Bogota, I realized I was completely in love with this kind of like being outside, the feeling that it meant, like the things that I had seen. And I remember going back, trying to like keep all of those sights and sounds in my brain, watching everything, trying to make sure that I kept them in for me. And I think that that exercise really did change something inside of me, because once I made it back to Bogota, the first thing I started realizing was that everything around me looked quite different. And without going too far, 2 blocks from my house, there was a park that I had always overlooked, and I started going there just because it reminded me of the jungle and a little bit like the plants, the animals. And one of the things I realized really quickly was that growing up, I had always thought that there were only like 5 different species of birds in Bogota, but it turns out that in that particular park, we had over 100 and something different species. So that diversity literally materialized in front of my eyes. The animals and the plants and everything just became so exciting, and like the bug of traveling and the desire to see other things was there right in front of me. Now, throughout my career and my professional life, I've actually been able to travel through deserts, to jungles in different places, temperate regions. And I finally made it back to Alaska, and I realized how excited and how beautiful that particular habitat was for me. And I always kind of like wondered, well, the tropics are just so amazing and so incredible that it just made me wonder, why is it that I feel so happy and so connected to Alaska? And then one of the things I realized really quickly was that it was basically because of those documentaries that I used to watch with my father, and how it made me connect with my inner self, with the reason that drove this whole experience, and how it made me feel. Today, the kinds of questions that I ask are questions that usually take a very broad geographic scale, that make me travel or make me collect data in many different parts of the world. And what I basically do is look at the different traits that species show today, and I try to use that combined with evolutionary information about how those species are related to try to understand the process of evolution and how we got to the place where we are today.